Street.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise to speak to the Ngati Tuwharetoa, Raukawa and Arawa River Iwi Waikato River Bill, this in its second reading. Mr. Speaker, Labour supports this bill. It was clear from our position on the Select Committee and in the first reading of the bill that we were going to support it, partly because negotiations had originally been led by Dr Michael Cullen, with the agreement signed by Labour on the 4th of September 2008 and the deed of settlement signed by the National Government on the 17th of December 2009. So we have an interest, Mr. Speaker, in supporting this bill, and I'd just like to traverse some of the material that emerged from the Select Committee's report with respect to the bill and to highlight perhaps a couple of issues in particular which will be taken up in more detail when we get to the committee stages. Mr. Speaker, the Select Committee recommended that the bill be passed with a number of amendments. These amendments dealt with joint management agreements, the Te Arawa Lakes, the Upper Waipa River, the Waikato River Authority membership, and regulations and bylaws, and the relationship to the Raupatu claims and the legislation surrounding those. Mr. Speaker, there are a couple of things which I would like to mention in particular, but first of all, can I say that the amendments that the Māori Affairs Select Committee has put forward, I think, do enhance the bill. And as I said in my first reading speech on this bill, I think where the Minister for Treaty Negotiations took the essential agreement signed by the Labour government in 2008 is a good place, and I commend him for that. And the particular bit that I wish to address myself to, Mr. Speaker, is around the nature of the Waikato River Authority and the membership of that. Originally, when Labour was in government, the original deed established a number of statutory boards, but the Minister, Honourable Chris Finlayson, since renegotiated the deed to replace the statutory boards with one single co-governance entity, namely the Waikato River Authority. And that, I think, is a good change. It's a good change in that it appears that all of the iwi are in agreement with that structure, and it seems that it might be more workable than the previous design. But secondly, the fact that it says that the membership can be re-examined during the review process at a later date is also helpful. As we are dealing in this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, with a co-management agreement, which is, as the Minister said in her speech a moment ago, a precedent for other such arrangements, it's suitable that a review be built in to the structure at this stage so that any changes or anything that needs to be adjusted because of the movement of relationships, the addition of people, the re-examination of issues and contributions to them can be built into the structure of the Waikato River Authority as it proceeds with its work. Submissions actually recommended that the membership of the Waikato River Authority be increased from 10 to 12 so that Ngati Koroki Kahukura could be represented in the authority membership. But the Māori Affairs Committee believed that there should be a way found for Ngati Koro ki Kahukura to achieve their aspirations, but maintained that the authority should remain at 10, which would be a workable number, and therefore in the end recommended no amendment to the membership of the authority. For the reasons that I've just given, namely that there is a review process built in to this structure that is an acceptable place for the Māori Affairs Committee to land, and clearly everybody was in agreement with that in the end. A couple of points that I'd like to make about joint management agreements. We refer to it here as a co-management approach, and to me this is very significant. The Minister just said a moment ago that this legislation actually conveys some respect for the autonomy of each of the three iwi. In this sense, Mr. Speaker, this is not simply a bill about cleaning up an ailing river. This bill is much more than that. One could see it as that if one wanted to be minimalist about it, because indeed the Waikato River is ailing for a number of reasons I haven't got time to traverse tonight, and the restoration of this great river to health, which will be important right across the regions which it passes through, is going to be the responsibility of this Waikato River Authority. However, it is not simply a bill about cleaning up a river. It is a bill that gives life to the Treaty of Waitangi. And it begins to address some issues, not only in substance but in structure, that I think are important for the future of this country. It is something that outlines the vision and strategy for the river, as it says. And to have a vision and a strategy for a river is something that may sound odd to the uninitiated. However, it has very practical implications. As well as the practical implications of restoring the river to health, it has significant relationship implications as well. And it is the relationship implications of this bill that I think make it a very significant piece of legislation. It goes some way to experimenting with a new structure and a new process, which may well, as the Minister said, be a precedent setter. And that is a good thing. If we are going to enact in real time, in a real way, the Treaty of Waitangi in the 21st century, then I suggest that this bill is one very good way of going about that. Having a built-in review also allows for correction if the process seems not to be working, or if additional members are required, or if there is something else that needs to be assessed through a review of the Waikato River Authority and its membership. And so it gives me great heart that this piece of legislation addresses not only the physical environment that is so important to all of us, but also relationships as they might be played out in the 21st century under the Treaty of Waitangi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.